Today, the world sees Tibet as a land struggling for autonomy within China. With tens of thousands of its people forced into exile in India and elsewhere, in the face of severe cultural repression, Tibet's fight to preserve its identity is a seemingly uphill struggle. But this was not always the case. Did you know that Tibet was once a massive empire in its own right? An empire so powerful that it could even take control of the imperial Chinese capital for a fortnight and install its own emperor. This is the story of how that happened. This is the story of how the now subjugated region of Tibet occupied the Chinese capital and even installed its own Chinese emperor. In the 21st century, the power dynamic between China and Tibet seems lopsided. But once upon a time, it was quite the opposite. According to Tibetan history, the first king to unite its many tribes was Netri Zenpo in the 2nd century BCE. Modern historians, however, believe that the era of Tibet as a powerful and unified political force came only some centuries later. This era was ushered in by Songtsen Gampo, who reigned during the first half of the 7th century CE. At this time, Tibet began competing directly with China's Tang dynasty for influence in Inner Asia. In 670 CE, Tibet's defeat of a Tang army led by General Shui Rengwei would pave the way for the conquest of the buffer kingdom of Tuyuhun and bring the Tibetans into direct contact with Tang-ruled areas. With Tuyuhun secure, Tibet would see success upon success against the Tang, and by the middle of the 8th century, much of northwestern China would be in its hands. The stage was now set for the emergence of King Tisong Deten, under whom Tibetan power would reach its zenith. Deten, not merely content with consolidating Tibetan rule over conquered parts of Tang China, would set his eyes on a bigger prize. By 763 CE, the Tibetans, led by Deten, captured the strategically important area of Songchao and were now knocking at the gates of the imperial Tang capital of Chang'an, which is now known as Xi'an, famed for its terracotta soldiers. Meanwhile, in 763 CE, Tang China was in all kinds of trouble. Just years prior, a military general called An Lushan had ignited a rebellion against the imperial court, with other Tang generals subsequently taking his side. The rebellion ended, but not before it had severely weakened Daizong in particular and the Tang Empire in general. Daizong and Tang officials were not on the best of terms either, and so China was rather vulnerable, with a Game of Thrones playing out in Tang territory. Sensing Chinese weakness, Deten's Tibetans would march into the Tang capital and occupy it for a fortnight. Daizong would flee to Shanzhou, and the Tibetans would install rival Prince Li Chenggong to reign gloriously. Naturally, the local Chinese administrators didn't take particularly well to this new glorious rule, which lasted a mere fortnight. They refused to cooperate and frustrated the puppet ruler installed by the Tibetans. With news of a relief Tang army approaching, the Tibetans decided that the game was not worth the candle. Having made their point, they left after 15 days, but not before sacking the capital on their way out. Daisung returned to his throne, but the balance of power between the two empires was now clearly in Tibet's favor. Songzhao was thereafter settled by Tibetans from Gari and came to be classified variously as parts of the historic Tibetan regions of Amdo or Kham. Sharkok and neighboring Khopukok remain Tibetan-speaking areas to this day. Be that as it may, Tibet was not in a position to overrun the Tang completely. Following another 60 years of sporadic fighting, the two sides would finally conclude a non-aggression treaty in 821 CE. In it, they promised to attack each other no more. Stone pillars remembering the treaty were erected in both Tibetan and Tang territory. They bore the words, "Tibet and China shall guard the present border and the territory over which they each hold sway. All to the east of the present boundary is the domain of Great China. All to the west is totally the domain of Great Tibet. Tibetans shall be happy in the land of Tibet. Chinese shall be happy in the land of China." Today, these Tibetan successes over Tang China are nothing but distant memories for the Tibetans fighting for their homeland. But the memory of this glorious past may yet serve to inspire.